Thanks for joining us. This week, we're going to look at both ends of the business scale. We'll hear how Cork's colleges are investing in young entrepreneurs as opposed to just churning out graduates. But first, an in-depth interview with one of Cork's leading businessmen. I'm Jonathan Healy, and this is Red Business.
The Red Business Podcast with CompuB, building your business with premium Apple solutions. CompuB.com.
And now on Red Business, I want to talk to somebody who has been involved at the highest level of business in Cork for many years. He was the boss man at Bord Gáis Energy. He now is the boss at Amarenco, which is his own company, which is involved in solar power. But he also has his hand in the Port of Cork and a few other companies. John Mullins, that doesn't do your CV justice at all, but you're very welcome to Red Business.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Tell me a little bit about how you started, John. When did you wake up one day and say, right, I'm going to be a businessman and this is how I'm going to go about doing it?
Look, like anything else, events, my dear man, as somebody said once, it just so happened, look, I started life as an engineer and I worked in the ESB, went back and at one stage and did a master's in business, decided, look, if for me to progress in business, I had to go off and get an extra qualification. Did that in the Smurfit Business School in Dublin. Pretty much immediately, I moved to London and worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant, and then came home after a number of years, and then started sort of the real commercial business side. Brought ESBI into Spain, built their largest investment ever, which was the Amorebieta power plant, and then came back. Jim Barry, a fellow Cork man, decided that I could do a job in NTR. Went off into NTR. We set up ultimately an ethanol business in the United States. Travelled all over the United States and set up an ethanol business, and that business now is on the NASDAQ. And then I got a phone call. I was coming off a plane in Pittsburgh one day, and I got a phone call, would I be interested in Bord Gáis? I said, look, at 39 years of age, I don't usually give it to those guys. So I decided, look, I'll go back and do the interview. And as I say, an accident happened, I got the job. And after that, really, I suppose, spent 5 years there. And then, all state jobs come to an end, by the way, even in politics, right? And the reality was that I had to think about what I was going to do next. And I saw that solar power was coming really fast into Europe, and it will be coming into Ireland as well. And set up a company, and this is where we are now.
And I want to talk about Amarenco in just a little bit because people mightn't be familiar with the brand. But in terms of all the leaps that you made there, John, I know you rattled them off quite quickly, but what was the most daunting one of all? What was it going into the state sector and maybe making that leap out of the private sector and going, I wonder, will I be able to make the difference that I want to make?
Well, actually, quite interestingly, I what surprised me was that when I went through the interview process, I remember it well, I was up in the Hayfield Manor Hotel here in Cork, and I went in with an agenda. I had worked in Britain where a lot of gas companies became electricity companies, and electricity companies became gas companies, and the dual fuel offers you have it today. I set about going about putting that in place, and the board, or the interview board, basically liked what I had to say. But quite clearly, I was going to go into an organisation which was relatively young, from the 1970s in Bord Gáis. We need to remember that. It was only established from the old Cork Gas Company and Dublin Gas Company. But it would have been a state company. But the state company quite clearly is a commercial state company, and the approach would have been, well, what's the agenda to make it grow? They had started an electricity agenda, but needed somebody with electricity background. That's what I had. I had built power plants internationally, done renewables. So that's exactly what I did inside there. I think they thought I was absolutely mad when I said that we were going to take on the ESB. We did, and we did it successfully. In the first year, we took in over 500,000 customers.
And it's viciously competitive, that market. And you really started that competition because they had a monopoly, and you shook it up. Was there a sense of personal satisfaction when you saw that, when you saw prices coming down, you saw people willing to abandon effectively the habit of a lifetime?
Well, the ironic thing is that all the guys on the far side were my former colleagues in the ESB. So the reality is that you had to set a new agenda. I think I always say there was a lucky general at the time, because I remember it was in February, and we were just right in the cutting edge of the recession. I had come in 07. and you could see, bad debts were rising. You could see
I remember doorstepping you on more than one occasion when there were bad stories about Bord Gáis Energy, and you having to fend them off. So you were dealing with a lot of negativity there as well.
I remember actually, God rest him, Dave McCarthy up in the north side, and I remember talking to him about, I had an agenda about putting free prepaid meters into homes where there were difficulties. There was no policy on that, and I set about making sure there was that policy. Probably because I grew up in the area that Dave served. Right, I knew, understood that people were struggling. And that was the social aspect of the job you had to do, right? You don't get any plaudits for that, but ultimately you have to ensure that you give people every opportunity to be able to pay their bills in as economic way as possible, and also that they had the real opportunity of avoiding disconnection, which is a policy here in Ireland.
Then, as you say, all good things come to an end, and all state jobs like that come to an end. When you left, when you transitioned out of Bord Gáis, did you find yourself, like most people who leave a job, a little bit bereft, a little bit of a drift that creeps in going, well, what am I going to do next?
Well, I suppose, like anything else, and I'd say if you talk to former ministers or people who've taken any type of role in life at a senior level, they wake up on the 1st of January when they finish their contract and there's no infrastructure around them. You don't have a PA anymore. You don't have somebody to take care of your diary. There you are, all you've left I remember the car had to be handed back. I had to go up to the airport and hire a Skoda for 6 weeks before I could get a car. I had to buy a car myself. I had to go off and start at the very base again, and try and build up something. And I had to go out and ask people to support that. And the key word in all of this is just perseverance. And if you feel, because there were, as I said to people previously in presentations, there were plenty of walks down Garryvaux Beach wondering exactly what was going to happen next.
And out of those dark moments where you have your vision, John, you can do it, there's a purpose to it, but those dark moments, those walks down Garryvaux Beach, how did you cope with them and go, maybe I am wrong, maybe this isn't how I'm going to make money?
Well, you just keep on trying, keep on knocking on doors. If you don't keep on knocking on doors and persevere, you're just not going to get there. Simple as that. No matter how capable you are. It's no different in the sporting world. It's no different in politics. It's no different in business or any other, gambit. You just have to keep on knocking on the door. Fortunately, my chairman, who sits on the board of the Tyndall with me here in Cork, liked what I was doing. And he decided, look, would you build one for me in France? So we built him a solar farm, and we got paid for that. And then we built another one. And then all of a sudden we went out and had more people interested and got more money into the business. And clearly as we were doing this, you have to dilute your stake in the company, but that's what you have to do. If you're, at this stage we've done from that one plant 3 years ago, we've now probably on our 20th in France. We've about 75 million worth of construction going on down there at the moment. Our team has gone from 4 people to about 48. Right across London, Dublin, Cork, and a place called Gaillac near Toulouse, and we're now going into the wind sector. So it's been a journey. But
would you consider the idea of solar a success at this point? Because we don't have that many solar farms. People are still a little bit cool on the technology. Let me put it that way. Is this inevitable? Is this what's going to happen? It's just we have to come around to the idea.
Well, ironically, my final year project in electrical engineering was solar power, looking at solar. And I remember Jerry Rickson, the former president of UCC, going back a couple of presidents now, is still very much believes that solar is where we're going. If I told you that in China they install more power every year of a solar nature than we have on this island today, that gives you a sense of the scale of where solar is at. And
has the technology improved an awful lot? The idea that, like everyone would have said, that you can't generate enough, the sun doesn't shine very much in this country. Are you overcoming all those hurdles?
Well, the real issue is how expensive is it? It's become a lot cheaper. So therefore the cost per unit is actually coming down. I would say to you, if it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, you would say it was extremely marginal that you could go and put solar in Ireland. It's now changed. Solar now actually is very relevant in practically all markets across Europe, in the United States. And as the price gets lower, the validity of the technology can go northwards on the globe or southwards on the globe. And that's because it needs less irradiation to basically produce.
Doesn't need the sun to be shining.
Well, no, I mean, in essence, we produce sugar beet in this part of the world. Sugar beet needs sunlight. Sunlight creates glucose, that creates sugar. It's no different for solar power. And the reality is that we will see these solar farms. We have solar farms already in Northern Ireland, the British government supported. And by the way, it's 200 hours less of sunlight in Belfast than it is in Cork. So for me, even in Aberdeen, which is, you can see the Northern Lights in the wintertime, they have solar. Solar is going to become a more dominating electricity technology in the future, and Elon Musk and others are, believe the same.
And that's, again, indulge a personal question rather than a business one. Is it going to be the idea of the solar farm, whereby you have loads of cells on one farm? Are we going to have these on the roof of our houses in years to come?
Well, if I said to you that in 20 years from now, and hopefully both of us are not in nursing homes.
Indeed.
That what we will see is that each house, each location, commercial location, could very well be a user and a producer of electricity. So what that means is that your house, Jonathan, could have 4 to 6 panels on its roof. You'll have a battery in your utility room, just like you have a boiler now. That battery will decide automatically, without your intervention, whether it's going to be producing power for you or producing power for the grid. And all of those signals will be sent to that battery automatically by a central system that says, we need power, or you need to take power, based on price.
And it means nothing to me. I just sit there and turn the lights on.
You just basically have this installed, and it's going to be just an automated process that is going to be run by a centralized, big data processor, and that's the way of the future. What's
the value of this industry now, John? What would you estimate it at?
Oh, it's the biggest power industry in the world now. It's just probably just ahead of wind. You're probably looking at, I would say last year, I think renewable investment was about $300 billion, and I would say solar probably is in the region of about 130 billion of that.
It's a lot of money, and I suppose it's only fair that we get a little piece of it here in Ireland as well.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about other things. As you have fingers in many other pies. Port of Cork is a big one, all moving from close to where we are now in the city centre down to Ringaskiddy over time. Great hope in the future for that, but there's a big cloud hanging over all of this, which is Brexit. How worried about Brexit are you, John, and how do you think it's going to impact on all that great potential that you've identified for the port and for the city?
There is as much potential out of Cork as there is negativity, in my view, as a result of Brexit. Now, in saying that, I get a sense that we may see a softer Brexit than where things started. And I think the Labour Party's move in Britain over the last number of weeks actually is quite instructive. And I think if that was tested in the future, certainly I think we may see a slower, less impactful Brexit than we're now facing at the moment.
Very much ado about nothing, potentially. We don't know. It depends if Corbyn holds the line or whether Theresa May decides that it's not, the hard Brexit she's been pursuing isn't the best option. In general, John, Cork appears to be doing well. We're seeing more cranes on the horizon, which always is a good benchmark of how things are progressing. And there's employment coming in. What's the biggest challenge for Cork right now in terms of economic growth?
The last census was the first census in 3, where we saw an increase in population in the city, which is to be welcomed. We need an expanded city to be able to show that we're a larger economic region as we go forward. I think city regions sort of dominate now the economics of Europe and the economics of the world, and I think we just need to ensure that there is an expanding city. one where we have the proper level of infrastructure for immigrants. Because the reality here is that if you look at economic growth rates in the country, even at 3, 4, 5%, and we have a national unemployment level of 6.1, 6.2%, where are the people going to come from to keep that growth rate going, and where are they going to live? And for me, they're the most fundamental questions that we have in Ireland, but we have really fundamental questions here in Cork as well to answer. That's why we're presenting a plan on Tivoli. So when we move the container port out of Tivoli, we hope to have a brand new village within the city, which could take 3,000 to 4,000 dwellings and has all the infrastructure, including rail and bus and all of the utility infrastructure.
So a completely different vista on that side of the city as you're driving in.
Absolutely, and certainly a real expansion in the inner north side, if you want to put it that way.
And looking across the river then, and just to finish up, the other side of it, which you've been involved in as well, Páirc Uí Chaoimh. One hell of a slog, I'd say, John. You were the chairman of that development group, but when it opened, I remember speaking to you around the time, the pride you had in it. Now that you've seen it actually stage matches, it's about to start hosting events. Was it worthwhile?
I think when the GAA get a stadium, which has been supported to the extent that it has been supported, and in terms of financially now, 30 million from government, 20 million from the central GAA, 10 million of the county board's own money, and then the Munster Council, coming in for about 3.25 million. It was a great start in terms of the development of a stadium to have that money. There's many cities in the world, by the way, that have zero money, looking at their stadium. Clearly the sale of premium tickets and also then the franchising and also the pouring rights and all of these things essentially help. Ed Sheeran concert next year for 3 days. I mean, I was here, Jonathan, you remember Michael Jackson. That weekend, you couldn't walk down Patrick Street with the crowds, right? I'm just wondering what it's going to be like when Ed Sheeran comes to town. We're going to have 140,000 concert revelers in and around the town for 3 days solid. That for me is the most important thing, because the economic benefit of what the GAA has done is going to be phenomenal, and we're already seeing it. There are people employed down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh now daily. There are barbecues being held, as I understand. There's conferences. Musgraves, I think, had all of their retailers in from Centra there this week. So all of that now is a fantastic facility that's just not all about hurling or football. It's actually got a lot more dimensions to it. So, I think hopefully we might see more concerts next year, a bit more development. We certainly would encourage Páirc Uí Chaoimh to be used as the location for the All-Ireland quarterfinals permanently.
Just putting it out there.
Absolutely. And again, that's great for Cork businesses. I mean, a publican not far from where you grew up said to me, he said, John, do you realise what an Ed Sheeran concert would do for my business? And I said, what would it do? He said, it would be equivalent, one day of Ed Sheeran would be equivalent to 3 weeks of turnover.
Just one day?
One day.
And it'll happen 3 times next year, if not a little bit more as well. John Mullins, it's been great talking to you. The best of luck with Amarenco and all your other concerns. Thanks for joining us in Red Business.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
The Red Business Podcast with CompuB Business, improving productivity with the latest Apple technology. CompuB.com.
So John Mullins has been in business quite a long time, as you would have gathered from that. But what about the other end of the spectrum, the people who are starting out now? I mentioned previously how universities and ITs treat business very differently to even when I went to college 20 years ago, and that there's more of an entrepreneurial spirit than ever before. So we're going to talk about the business of young people. And with me now in studio to go through all of that, we have Kevin and Joe, who are from Frankly Nuts, which is a weekly podcast. Gentlemen, you're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thanks for
And we also have Ross O'Halloran, who his company is called Safety Solutions. Is that right, Ross?
Yeah, that's it.
Very good. And also Adrienne Rogers, who's the head of enterprise at the Cork City Local Enterprise Office. Adrienne, how are you?
I'm good, Jonathan. Thanks very much.
It's great to have you all. Thank you very much for coming in. And I'm going to begin with the businesses and find out what they do. Frankly Nuts, is that a description of your general mental being, Kevin and Joe, or how would you describe it?
I suppose, like, the frankly is the kind of open, honest part of the conversation, and then the nuts would be the kind of banter and the kind of fun we bring to it.
We want to kind of bring it in loose and lively, I suppose, like a loose and lively podcast kind of thing. Like we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Hold on. Sorry, it's a rival podcast. I'm going to have to stop it there. We can't have rival podcasts.
We don't consider you a competitor.
No.
I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult. So I'm going to gloss over it. So tell us, who do you talk to and where did you come up with the idea?
I suppose we would have both been very interested in podcasts and stuff. We both are in college together in CIT in business, and every morning and stuff throughout last year we would have come in and say, did you see Joe Rogan's podcast last night or the True Geordie podcast last night? And then we were kind of thinking like, geez, why don't we go for our own? Like there's nothing really in Cork like this. I know you've your own on here, Jonathan. But
again, treading the line.
Nothing like two young people, like, interviewing.
Come on. That's an even worse insult. I'm not even young anymore. Okay, we're going to move on. So who do you talk to?
So our first guests were Shawnee Maguire, formerly of Cork City, but now Preston North End, and Kevin O'Connor. So they were our first guests. So it was massive for us to get to do them because they were a hot topic at the time. And then our second podcast was with Dan Sweeney. So he's a local entrepreneur. He owns Dan Sweeney Health and Fitness and the Pallet Cafe. And we've had Jason Moore there, the Fuckleby Donuts. Nathan Adams, who's a local model and he's an entrepreneur as well, owns his own agency. And recently we just did one with Paul Mack. So he's Ireland's best barber. And we also had Jenny O'Leary.
I have to say, at least one of you doesn't need the services of Ireland's best barber. Could you do beards?
Huh? Do I do beards?
No, could he have done the beard?
Does beards.
He does beards. Okay.
Mine doesn't need any touching, John. It's beautiful.
And that's when you're in the middle of all of this. It's kind of, speaking for someone who does a podcast, it's an unknown world because everything changes very quickly. What's good one week is not good the next week. I mean, how are you coping with that? Because you're trying to make money out of this eventually.
Yeah. That's the hope. I don't know. I suppose it's very interesting. Like we're just kind of finding our feet, I suppose, as we go at the moment. We've got 9 done, I think.
9 done, yeah. We've only launched 9 weeks, really, like.
Yeah. So we're kind of finding our feet as we go. Like we're kind of, I suppose we've never had any experience with interviewing people or anything in the past, like, but I suppose we're just trying to fake it till we make it, really. I suppose, like, you know.
Well, that's weird. I've done it for 20 years. Still haven't been caught yet. And you're doing it out in the Rubicon Centre out in CIT. So you're both CIT graduates, students?
Students, yeah. So we're both in 4th year business management at the minute. So we're in our final year.
So is this a distraction to the business management as well? That that's how these careers start, lads. I hate to break it to you. That you get
like we're
sidelined where you could have actually made money.
Yeah, we're missing class this morning now to be here, but I suppose it kind of goes hand in hand really because we're both interested in marketing and stuff as well, and you have a big digital marketing aspect to it. So
okay,
yeah,
cool, very good. Well, let's bring in Ross O'Halloran. Ross, a company very much on the other end of the spectrum altogether. Your Safety Solutions. Tell me a little bit about what you're about.
When I was coming up with a product for the Student Inc. program, I had a look at problems in my own life and in everyday, what was going on in society and everything. And my own grandmother was driving down the road and she had a stroke at the wheel and she was pulled in.
When she was driving?
Yeah, while she was driving, yeah. She was there for 2 hours before anyone ever came to her. Now, thankfully, she was okay, but I was saying there should be a product on the market that tends to the needs that's there for the elderly people that drive. So I came up with the Peace of Mind Swift Signal Response Unit. So it's basically a panic button for our vehicles.
So is it in the car?
It's in the car, yeah. It's retrofitted, so like you'll be able to buy it off the shelf now, like maybe down in Halfords or something like that. That's the aim anyway.
And how does it connect back to base? Is it on a GSM or?
It's the 2G GSM network. So when the unit's engaged, instantaneous two-way talk is engaged with your two-way talk contact. So that could be like your loved one or the emergency services. As well as that, then there's a text message sent to a set list of contacts that are pre-coded into the device. So this would be your loved ones, anyone who you might want to know.
So it's a lot of people will have home alarms that will do that. If the alarm goes off, it'll text you, it'll text your neighbour, it'll text your father-in-law or whoever.
Up with now as well, but this is specific now to vehicles because there's nothing there specific to vehicles. Because someone who might need it at home, they'd have the telephone to ring. But if you're in the car and you have a stroke in the car, there's no one there. You might be driving on your own, So that's where I came up with it.
It's peace of mind as well, isn't it? Because a lot of people.
Peace of Mind. That's the name of the company. Is Peace of Mind Safety Solutions.
Is it okay? Yeah. And I'd imagine it's very similar to the peace of mind that you get from having the bracelet around your neck if you're in the house. A lot of elderly people have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what we aim to instill with it. We aim to instill confidence and peace of mind in the user, as well as the user's loved ones. because half the time it's kind of the loved ones are saying, geez, I'm worried about her driving on her own, or I'm worried about him driving on his own, you know. So that's what we aim to do, is instill confidence.
So at what stage in development is it? Have you got prototypes? Have you actually gone to market with it yet?
No, well, I went into Rubicon with just an idea, and it was great because with the funding I received from the local enterprise office and the office space and the networking inside, I was able to team up with a colleague of mine, Paul Keneally, who was able to throw together a rapid prototype. So I have the first prototype ready. I'm waiting for funding to come through for my next prototype, so I can move on with the business then.
Okay, so in other words, it's fairly advanced at
Yeah,
that
yeah.
point. Yeah,
Well,
you know what you want to do.
We're
and-
nearly finished. We have 2 more prototypes to finish the prototyping stage, and then we can move on to CE testing, that kind of thing.
Okay, Adrienne Rogers. It's great to see such enthusiasm. I'm going to sound like an old lad here, but enthusiasm from young people, because, and it comes back to the point I made at the start here, that when I went to college, the attitude was, we've educated, now shag off. Whereas now the lads all here are in the Rubicon, and we know that there's the Ignite program in UCC, which does something very similar. It's great to see, isn't it?
It's fantastic. And I suppose what's great about this is we're bringing the elements of education, innovation and youth together under the one roof. And CIT's programme Student Inc. has been fantastic. It's grown from strength to strength every year, really, Jonathan, over the last kind of 5-6 years. And I suppose to see the likes of the lads here from Frankly Nuts, who bring a bit of fun to the whole thing, is fantastic. And also having Ross, who, by the way, is only a first-year student.
You're only a first year?
I mean, we
Yeah,
have
I
way
just
to go here yet, you know. So it's fantastic. Like, they wouldn't be doing this thing if they didn't have the supports in CIT and the support of the local enterprise office.
And tell us a little bit more about how the Leo can get involved here, because I think of the Leo, I think of companies that are, out lads like yourself setting up. I mean, it does affect all various age groups. I know, I'm underselling myself here.
The local enterprise office has a range of initiatives that are targeted at education as well, because that's part of our remit, to drive the awareness and the promotion of entrepreneurship. So we have second level programs that are aimed at students usually in transition year, and then we have the third level programs such as UCC Ignite, Student Inc., and we have Ireland's Best Young Entrepreneur competition. So I'd encourage anybody out there who's under the age of 35 to apply for Ireland's Best Young Entrepreneur. It's a great idea, and it gives people an opportunity to immerse themselves in a boot camp, which is fully supported by the local enterprise
And
offices.
and look, these guys are ripe for that. They're in the learning phase of their lives. So, I mean, they're going to
Absolutely.
absorb it like a sponge right now.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point. The younger that we can actually engage with people and get the whole message about entrepreneurship as being an option for life as opposed to taking a job, the better off.
You're right.
this
They're
country will
more
be.
easily corruptible when they're younger. I think that's probably the best description to put on it.
Shh, don't tell them that.
I just want to ask you, let's see, who would be, and Kevin and Joe, I'll come back to you on this. Who would be, a role model for you guys in terms of entrepreneurship? I've seen somebody who's generated their own business, created their own look. Who would you look to?
Jeez, that's a tough one, all right.
You still have to answer it. This is what you do to other people, so it's only fair.
I suppose as cringy as it is, like, my dad has his own business, so I suppose I'd look to him and he's created something and he's gone out on his own and he's his own boss, and I suppose that's something that I've always wanted to do as well. Like.
So there was always a little bit of it in the family.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
You can look to his dad as well.
Yeah. Mine would be a bit further afield. I mentioned already, it's Joe Rogan. Like, he has his own podcast. He's one of the top podcasts in the world, like, and he's a UFC commentator and all that, like, and he's just got a massive profile, and I just idolise him, to be fair, like, so.
Ross, who would you look to?
Jeez, it'd have to be Steve Jobs, I'd say. Definitely Steve Jobs.
Yeah, just because of the
Just because
the
I saw
story.
his movies and he seems like a stand-up guy and he's a good story, like, mind him, you know.
He came to Cork a lot as well.
He
let's
did,
not
yeah, he
forget.
came to Cork, yeah. so it
he
good
was
to see
big. Adrienne, for you, I mean, do you have an entrepreneur that you hold up above everybody else?
Well, I suppose, to be fair, you've mentioned John Mullins. John has actually done an awful lot for Cork, and I think as an entrepreneur, he's a great example for actually Cork people. Sometimes I don't think we need to look for international, mentors or guidance. I think we have them at a local level.
Yeah,
as well.
and the good thing is they're very accessible, and they
Absolutely, and they give
offer
back.
encouragement,
They
and they
give
do
back.
give back, which is, I don't know if that's a uniquely Cork thing or not, but there is that pool there that can be drawn upon. Just to finish up, lads, where does this go? Like Ross, in your first year, you've come up with your first product. You'll probably be reinventing the wheel by the time you finish. But like, where do you see this going?
Well, with this product, it's because it's electronic product. There's a lot to do with it. You know, I can't just like come up with it in the morning and throw it on the shelf. It needs to be CE tested. It needs to be approved.
CE, that's European standard, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. So my plan is just to keep working at it while I'm at college, get as much funding together as I can, keep moving with it, and then by the time I finish college, I'll hopefully have it set up, so I'll be leaving with a degree in one hand and a business in the other, and that's kind of my dream with it.
Okay, and that's not a bad dream to have. Kevin and Joe, lads, where do you see this going?
So I suppose at the moment we're kind of within the region in Cork, like, and we want to move it national and international, and we'd love to kind of kit out a van and make it very mobile and wacky, and we'll say go on big road trips and do podcasts along the way.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of, yeah, that's the dream.
So
Like,
if there's anybody out there who wants to hook us up with a van or anything,
Just get
we're
on to
open
us.
to it.
Very good. Well, look, we wish you the very best. Look, where can people listen after they listen to this podcast,
Oh, of
obviously?
course, yeah.
Where can people hear Frankly Nuts?
I suppose they can catch us on YouTube for the video version of the podcast. So it's just Frankly Nuts. Just search that on YouTube and you'll catch all of them. And you can get it on audio versions of iTunes and SoundCloud. Just search Frankly
Perfect,
Nuts
very
as well.
good. And Ross, just in case, obviously you're not to market yet, so
No, I'm a good bit away now.
we just have to watch this space, is it?
Yeah.
Watch this space.
Well, add me on Facebook. I suppose.
There you are. Look, as I said, everyone likes an old follow on
Yeah,
Facebook.
yeah.
We'll leave it there. Ross O'Halloran from Safety Solutions, Kevin and Joe from Frankly Nuts, and Adrienne Rogers with the Cork Leo. Thank you very much for joining us on Red
very much,
Business.
Thanks very much, Jonathan.
Cheers, Jonathan.
My thanks to all my guests and to Niamh Hennessy for helping put it all together. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes. We'll catch you on the next one.
The Red Business Podcast with CompuB, Apple technology and solutions for your business. CompuB.com.